Good evening, everyone. I'm Shweta Mishra, and I welcome you all to Cure Talks. June is Men's Health Awareness Month, and we are honored to have Dr. Jamin Brahmbhatt back with us to talk about sperm health in 2021 and educate us about the effects of COVID-19, obesity, and various kinds of stress on sperms, especially in the light of an alarming decline in worldwide male fertility of more than 50% over the past 50 years, as highlighted in a recent systematic review of trends in sperm counts. Dr. Brahmbhatt is the president of Florida Urological Society and director of personalized urology and robotics clinic at Orlando Health Medical Group Urology. He is a board certified urologic and robotic surgeon, a TEDx speaker, and someone who is a well known as a national authority on men's health, who has dedicated his career to improving the life outcomes of not just his patients, but men and women everywhere. Until before the COVID-19 pandemic, every June, Dr. Brahmbhatt and his partner organized the Drive for Men's Health, a 10-day, 6,000-mile public engagement road trip, encouraging men to eat better, get active, and engage in preventative medical screenings. And his message is simple, and that is health and well-being for men in all walks of life, at home and across the globe. Dr. Brahmbhatt, welcome to Cure Talks.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure, Doctor. On the panel, we have with us men's health advocates David Stanley and Kristen Darcy. Kristen and David, welcome to Cure Talks. As always, it's a pleasure to have you both today on the panel.
Thank you.
Always happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. With that, I think I'll jump right in with the questions. We have a lot of good questions to cover and learn from Dr. Brahmbhatt. So, Dr. Brahmbhatt, the recently published book called Countdown by Dr. Shana Swan has a tone of urgency to it, right? And it calls for action to address this issue of decline of sperms. And the meta-analysis kind of mentions that there's a sperm count decrease of almost 50 to 60% over the period of 1973 to 2011. Could you please talk a little bit about that research in layman terms, and how do you explain or interpret that scenario, and how should a common man take it?
So I'm just going to talk like a common man myself. So thank you for having me. I think the reason you had me on is because I'm able to kind of talk to that common man. And let me just tell you, these studies that come out, they're great. They're very well done. And sometimes they're meant to cause alarm with a purpose. So they're not meant to cause alarm in that, oh my God, the world is dying, we're not going to have any more kids, and there's going to be no more men out there, or no more babies being made. The reality is it raises awareness for a topic that we've known about. Now, if you look at the nitty-gritty details of the study, there's different ways to extrapolate some of this data, and there's ways that you can kind of fine-tune it or present it. So it was a great study. And there is a decline. There is a decline, not just because men don't care or they're not taking the best care of themselves. Well, I guess they kind of are, but there's a natural decline in the entire population because of fast food and obesity epidemic and us just not exercising as much as we should be. So not only are we seeing high rates of diabetes, blood pressure, obesity, we're naturally going to see higher rates of other diseases. And in this case, for this talk and this purpose, would be the disease of infertility, which half the time can be related to that sperm count in men.
Of course. So basically, I think that meta-analysis mentions phthalates and bisphenols, right, as the main culprit that is killing the sperms. So do you have any comment on that? And
well, you can go to a lot of nitty-gritty detail about exactly what those are. And sometimes I feel like these things have certain agendas as well. I would like to go back to the basics because you want me to talk to the average man. And we can talk about these nitty-gritty things and what factors have these and how they can affect you overall. But, you know, that's like the basic science level, which dudes really don't care about. What dudes really care about the most is like the general broad stuff. Like, okay, what is going to help my sperm counts today or in 90 days when the cycle changes? And we can go down to like the little thing, that 1% of 1% cause of infertility, or we can focus on the big broad topics, which I often do with my patients. My patients in my office bring these studies. They bring these little things that they're like, okay, I'm going to change this and that. I'm going to get rid of these things and this thing. And I'm going to do this. I'm like, dude, you're 30 pounds overweight. You don't exercise.
Right.
You're not sleeping. You're stressed out. What about those things? When are you going to fix those things? And that's when they usually look at me and go back to the topic that they're focused on, because they think that small little thing is going to change their lives. And so that's why I tell my dudes, like, listen, read these studies, it's great education, but don't get stressed out about what you're reading.
Right. Okay. Moving on to the broad topic that people would actually care about, doctor. So how has COVID-19 affected male fertility or sperm health in the last 1.5 years that we have added? Has there been any research on this, and what does the data tell us?
This is a great time to have this conversation, because just a week ago, my buddy, Dr. Ranjit Ramasamy, who has been on the forefront of research related to infertility and the potential effects, not just from COVID, but the COVID vaccine. There was actually a study that he put out and his team from University of Miami put out early on in the COVID era, which actually found that there may be some change, but overall, there's not a major change. The biggest study that came out, which is more relevant to us now, is the effects of vaccines. So there's people coming up with all these excuses about not taking the vaccine. One of the excuses has been, oh man, it's going to affect my fertility potential, because there were some small studies that came out that showed that potentially could. Now, he did the largest study there. I think there were like 45 men. They looked at sperm counts before they got the vaccine, and then about 70 days after they got the vaccine, they found really no difference in sperm quality or quantics or anything. So I think that scare that's out there with either the vaccine or COVID, I think we're killing more sperm because of the stress that this disease process has caused us, the stress that we get from information that may not be the most correct information in the media. And I think the vaccine and everything does not, I can say confidently, I could say that before the study, and I can say that now even more confidently after reading these studies and knowing Dr. Ramasamy very well from a personal level, that there really is no significant data showing that it affects your overall sperm counts, which then generalizes to fertility.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. That's very helpful. And my next question was going to be on vaccines, and thank you for answering that already. And we also had one listener's question on that whether the vaccine is affecting male fertility or not. So thank you for that. Moving on to obesity, which you just mentioned a while back. So what's the science behind obesity affecting sperm health? And have you seen cases where there has been improved parameters of sperm health, like reduced DNA fragmentation and improved count and motility as a direct result of weight loss and increased physical activity?
Absolutely. If you look at obesity, there's several theories about the exact cause of or the exact pathologic changes that it creates. But most of us feel like there is an increased inflammatory response overall in your body. The second theory is that your body, when it has that excess weight, it has to focus on more things in your body. And when it has to focus on more things in your body, then obviously there's going to be less attention paid to some of your vital organs, whether it be the heart or the lungs, or in this case, the testicles. So there's just more of you out there for your body to manage. And the third is there's still that unknown factor that we're all still trying to do research on. But if you look at the research, there's tons of studies showing that men are overweight have an X percentage decline in their sperm counts. And then men that are X percentage obese, whether it's grade 2, 1, 2, or 3 obesity, there's direct links. And actually there's studies that have shown that men that were obese, that had no sperm, that when they lost the weight, got onto a good, healthier routine, actually regained some of their sperm count. So there's tons of vast research on this topic. And there's ongoing research on the topic as well.
Right. Thank you.
So you mentioned, Phil, you're mentioning a lot of science-based things, which is awesome. I did not get these questions beforehand, and I'm glad I didn't, because I would have researched it in nitty-gritty detail and bored everyone. But all the things she's mentioning are actually very interesting. That's on a day-to-day basis. When I open up my research journal, like I actually have this month's Journal of Urology, and most of the studies that are on infertility actually quote these exact things that she mentioned. Is there DNA fragmentation? Is there oxidative stress, et cetera, et cetera? I think this stuff is great research, but the problem that happens in my office is patients want to get these tests done. And I'm like, great. We can get it done. Number one, they may be too expensive. Or number two, you may have to go to like an academic center like the Cleveland Clinic or University of Miami. A lot of these things are not accessible to you. And also, at the same time, the data doesn't really change the basics of what we do.
Correct. Absolutely. Thank you, doctor. I guess I will not keep the panel waiting anymore, and I will now invite David to ask his question. David is a writer, teacher, voiceover actor, and audiobook narrator who speaks regularly on fatherhood, education, and cancer advocacy issues. David, please go ahead and ask your questions.
All right. Doctor, I like that. That was very average
David,
man.
Before you ask me a question, you said you speak a lot about fatherhood.
I do, yeah, absolutely. I'm very active in the fatherhood, dad bloggers space, yeah.
So I am a father of 3 daughters, 8, and 9. Very proud.
I have a group for you.
No, you do? Okay.
I do, dads with daughters.
But before I kind of get you to answer the answer I want to say, I want to make it natural is, what do you think how can I be a better father? Because I know you're supposed to ask me questions, but I don't get to talk to you.
Okay, fair point. How can any dad be a better father? Be the example for your children that you want them to be as adults. You know, they will, no matter what you say, they are going to watch you far more closely and judge your behavior and take it in for better or for worse than whatever comes out of your mouth and into their ears. So be that example. You have to be that authentic guy. It's, you know, the common conversation that we have is, especially dads with daughters, is you have to embody the father that you would like to, the guy that you would like to see your daughter at some point grow up, fall in love with, and marry. Right? And the dad on the porch cleaning the shotgun when the kid comes over, that's not the guy you want your daughter to marry. You know, you don't want to perpetuate that. So you just have to be a fair and honest and authentic guy who is the sort of fellow that you would like, if you know, your daughter to fall in love with when that's the appropriate time. That's a really common question too, and a really common conversation that we have. So
it's interesting you mentioned that. So I always equate father with friend. And
sometimes.
So not to go back to the infertility topic, but a lot of my guys spend so much time and invest so much money and so much stress into having that baby. And when that baby comes, you know, because I see them for round 2 or 3, and I often get very, very, I don't say this because I try not to get emotional in the office, but I see the father is not as engaged as they were trying to get there. It almost sometimes seems like they're just doing it to appease their partner. And so, guys, you know, you may be dealing with infertility, but do not do it just to appease your partner, because I'm telling you, like, it may seem like it's hard right now trying to get a baby and become pregnant. It ain't easy being a dad. It ain't easy being a parent. And it's a lot of work. And yes, so I'm glad that you mentioned that. And that allowed me to kind of relay to my guys that, hey man, this is not like a roller coaster that's done once the baby comes. Like, the real ride starts once the baby comes. So be ready.
9 months plus 3 days. Yeah. Let me just throw this out real quick. Disclaimer, I'm a board member for a group called Fathering Together. And we have one of our groups on Facebook, and any dad can join. It's called Dads with Daughters. It's got 130,000 men in it, all of whom, rule number 1, Kristen's mouth just, we also have a group of dads with sons, but the Dads with Daughters group has really taken off, because as men, we feel pretty competent serving as role models and, you know, guides for our sons. You know, most dads have the idea that having a son is like having an apprentice, right? But dads and daughters is a whole different dynamic, and we want to be involved, but we don't know how. because we are not nearly as comfortable with girls and young women as we are with guys. So this Dads with Daughters group that you can join has just taken off like unbelievable. In 2 years, we went from 250 people to really 130,000 guys. And the great thing about the group, of course, is that you will find anything that's happened to you has happened to somebody else in that group. And whatever has happened to you, you are not alone. And there's a lot of wisdom in the group that over the years, women as the typical nurturers have formed, you look at any group, any cultural group, and the women form groups to nurture the children. Guys who have mainly not been the nurturing parent, we are now in that position of being and wanting to be the nurturing parent, but not having the tools, right? We don't know how. So when you're involved in a good group like this one, there are guys in there who will share that knowledge. And they say, well, this happened with my daughter. This is how I handled it. And, it's the kind of the genius of social media as opposed to the cesspool of social media. So I'll look for you. Yeah, go ahead.
I love that, David, because we can talk about when we see our clients or we come to help people when they're trying to create their family, they're in crisis mode. There's not future visioning, they're just in the fight. And so I love what you guys are talking about because it's shifting this to see some of the work that I do with my clients is really asking what is your role, rules and roles, how do you see yourself as a dad? And I love this conversation because when you're in that crisis of infertility, you have those blinders on that you can only think about getting that baby. And then I know I lived that. And then you have your baby and you're like, oh my God, nobody told me X, Y, and Z.
How do I change diapers? Oh my God.
Yeah.
I changed a lot of diapers when I was when they were in diapers. So I tried to be a good dad. But you mentioned a very good thing, guys. You mentioned that change and that mindset shift, and just sharing myself. I try really hard to remain gender neutral with my kids. I tried to put them in ballet. I tried to put them in women's soccer. They didn't like it. They want to play Indian drums. They want to ride the Peloton. They want to go running and lifting weights at the gym with me, even though they're 8 years old. And I think that's why I've been able to build a good relationship with them, because I never saw them as a boy or a girl. I just saw them as my legacy.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's very important that I remember that.
Yeah.
So you have a question? Sure.
I was going to say, you have to meet your kid where that kid is. It's a lot like, I'm sure you have some interns and residents that trail around you all over the place. And there are some of those interns, they're terrified. They're educated, but they don't know what the heck is going on in that hospital. So you got to meet them maybe 70%, maybe even 80% of the way to pull them into that 50-50 relationship that can grow into where they're going to be 100% capable as a physician on their own. Your kids are exactly the same way. If your kid is, I want to ride the Peloton, I want to lift the weights, I am not at all interested in ballet, whether they're boy or girl or non-binary or whatever particular situation your family is in, you have to meet them far more than halfway. And that's
so you mentioned that. So I'm actually in my office,
I see that.
which my kids turned into a gym, and they use that machine way more than I do. So it's pretty cool. During COVID, we kind of just built this room out to be multifunctional, and that's the carpet they do their drum exercises. They play Indian drums, which they learned from a teacher in India. They do piano, and then they do this and that. It's wild. And I have lots of dads hitting me up dude, how do you do this with your daughters? It's interesting. They see what I post on social media and they're like, wait, how do I do that? But I think it's important. I think it's very important that guys that are getting into these situations kind of realize they're gonna have to take this kid in. But you mentioned something very interesting, man. You mentioned about residents and molding them and doing this. I think there is something to be mindful of. Just like a resident is here to learn from me and I'm there to mold them, it's vice versa as well. The best teachers are the ones that learn from their students.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, why it's important that dads also realize that. is you should be learning from your kids as well. Like my kids, I used to have a potty mouth. I don't anymore. My kids are always calling me out, but they're also teaching me things. They're curious about things. And instead of discounting them like, oh, come on, I try to learn. So I think that's very important. I think that's the same way a guy who's in his infertility states should think about their relationship with their doctor. A lot of the times it's like there's just like this barrier and they come in and they just feel like they've lost their machismo because they're not able to do this, and they're really not listening to what I have to say or the things I have to offer because they're just in this rut. And really I try to learn from them, like what can I do better to open them up and get them talking. And they should really make it a point to learn from me and take advice I have to give them and do it. You'd be surprised how many patients I do simple stuff on, they don't do it. I'm like, dude, now you were 31 when you started with me. I've been here 9 years, now you're 40, and we saw the same problem. He's like, I don't know. Like, it's just 90% of the patients are great, but then you get that 10%, which you're like, oh my gosh, like,
Right.
Or the ones that they probably just need your energy just to be with you. It's the shift, they're not ready for that shift. And that your presence in their lives probably makes a bigger difference than you realize. I wanted to, when you were talking about obesity, when we talk about men's fertility, we always talk about how you're talking about your exercising, and the supplements and how that affects fertility. But what I love about this conversations that we have when we come together, it's really about balance, right? So that you were talking about the obesity, but then we also have the other guys on the other part of the scale that you see, I'm sure, that are over exercising and taking supplements and really have a disconnect between how that's going to affect their overall fertility, right?
Yeah, I mean, once a month I see a guy that's on some testosterone, and they come in, they can't have babies. I'm like, dude, you can't have babies. Like, you got to stop this stuff. But what's interesting is you mentioned supplements. So, a lot of guys come in and then they just take our advice, half of it or all of it. But there are things that guys can start doing. There are actually supplements that are research proven to serve as the equivalent of a male prenatal. And there's lots of research coming, and I actually learn a lot from my REI colleagues. So when you think about infertility, there's two sets of doctors that deal with infertility. There's the female aspect, so those are reproductive endocrinologists. Those are gynecologists and obstetricians that went and did a specialty and a fellowship. And then there's the male aspect, which is generally handled by urology. And then us as urologists will do a fellowship and extra training to focus on that. So there's two sets of doctors. So sometimes patients get confused about why am I seeing two sets of doctors? But what I've learned from my REI colleagues is they seem to be a lot more on the forefront of supplementation. And even though they're not seeing the guy as a patient, they start recommending supplements. And for any guy out there dealing with this stuff, like don't just go on Amazon. Oh man, am I gonna get in trouble for saying that? But don't just go on any website and buy some supplements.
Right.
You know where they're made, you know what's in them. But there are some really high quality supplements out there. There's CoQ10. There's fish oil. If you're vegan, there's like other omega-3 versions of it. And then there's about 3 major players that have really good fertility supplements. And I won't mention anyone by name, but there are that are very high quality. Now, the reason you may not buy these and just buy whatever is on the counter at the local nutrition store is because these can be very expensive. They're expensive because there's quality control. So I would definitely go and look into these supplements and start them because that's something you can start doing today.
If somebody reached,
Sorry.
I was just going to say, so I understand why, especially in a forum like this that's open to everybody and who watches YouTube, you might not want to mention anybody by name, but and I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. If somebody reached out to your office individually and said, so you mentioned those supplement companies, would you share those names with them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I was just, because I mean, I'm as you can see, far past the age where I am thinking about having children. I mean, I'm not a grandfather yet, but right. I know I talk to a lot of guys in that age group, a couple of the men's groups I'm in. This is obviously, as you know, a really big topic of conversation among, millennial aged guys. They held off, many of them, until they were in their, late 30s. to have kids, and now they're they're having problems, and it's bothersome. And so actually, this was one of the questions that I submitted to Shweta earlier. I said lots of quote unquote TV doctors tout vitamins and supplements and specific diets as a means to boost sperm counts. How can a man sort truth from the lies and protect his bank account? And so I'm going to throw that one at you.
It's interesting you're saying this, because I am often on TV as well, and I do often talk about certain supplements, but I'm not paid by any of them. But if they want to hire me, at a certain rate, maybe. But
Right.
I've tried to remain non-biased. So in my office, we try to remain non-biased and give you the best information. And I usually don't recommend anything. I'm really advanced in technology and advancements in surgery, but when it comes to like certain recommendations, medically or supplement wise, I'm usually like a follower, not a leader. It's because I really like to kind of see the research before I start hyping things up, because, dude, I'm dealing with two humans' emotions here, right? It's the husband and wife. So I walk a very fine line. So I kind of let others dictate, like, okay, what are you doing? So, which may not be best for my overall practice and my street cred, but that's the reality. Is there's certain things I just like to follow, and that would be in the supplement thing. Now, dudes do take a lot of weird supplements, and the problem with supplements, and I mentioned this already, I'm going to say it again, is they're not regulated by the FDA, so you don't know where they're coming from. I have friends of mine that have multi-million-dollar businesses on Amazon, all these places where they sell supplements. And I'm like, man, where do these come from? And sometimes they don't even know, but a lot of the industry is all about profit, because there's a high profit margin with these supplements. And these labels, what's on the labels is not often regulated. So you got to be very, very careful. There are certain certifications, like I think it's like NC something, or I forget exactly what they are, but they are like NST certification. There's like certain certifications or global bodies that are regulated that do regulate these supplements, but you got to be very careful. Like, you don't want to just start dropping cash because you read some blog online. When it comes to like advice, medical advice that you see on TV, you just have to be careful. Some of my colleagues may kill me for saying this, because I myself am on TV a lot and I'm, recommending things. But you saw even in this case, when I was asked the first few questions, I kept it very general, very broad, and very non-confrontational. Because again, we're talking to the general population. When we're on TV, we're talking to pretty much people with, may not have the best education level in terms of medicine and their words. So you really have to be careful about who you're listening to, and always go do your research. But don't do your research with Dr. Google or Dr. Bing or Dr. Yahoo. Go do research with like a real doctor. And the biggest excuse dudes make is, oh, it's so hard to get in with the doctor and it costs so much money and et cetera. Listen, now we have telemedicine, telehealth. You got all these places where you can engage high-end professionals to start talking about things on a real basis, not just what you may have heard and et cetera. So I think it's very important that you seek medical advice before starting any supplement.
I have a quick story for you, and a kind of a follow-up question. My brother-in-law is an orthopedic surgeon, and a few years ago, at the kind of the dawn of the Dr. Google era, a patient of his came in with just, like literally 3/4 of an inch of paper that he had printed out and said, doctor, here, and he's flipping through it. He says, this is what's the matter with me. And Terry takes the stuff from him and flips through it and throws it at the trash. And he goes, man, that dude's messed up. It's a good thing you don't have that.
Nothing. I mean, I get that a lot. But I take a little bit different approach. Sometimes, and I feel like dudes just want to be heard. And I also specialize in chronic testicular pain, so patients with chronic pain. And what I've learned from that, which I've taken to the rest of my practice, whether it's infertility or general urology, is sometimes people just need an ear that listens to them. So when they've done all this research and spent days and hours, I actually ask my staff, like, hey, if they have anything with them, give it to me beforehand. So I'll quickly browse through it. And when I'm in the room with them, they may seem like I've spent hours looking at it, but I'll browse it. I'll acknowledge it, and I'll try to find one or two things that may be facts in the story to give them some confirmation and appreciation for the research they've done. But then I will start building that trust where I can start negating it. And I think I'm not the best at it, but I do try to kind of take that extra 5 minutes. And maybe this is why I'm always running an hour behind in the office, is I do try to take that extra 5 minutes, because that 5 minutes of me acknowledging the work they've done will lead me to have way easier visits with them in the future.
Right. I have a question for you. You know how you just mentioned the telehealth and the shift because of the pandemic, that it was, remote visits and everything. Have you noticed an increase that men are increasing or being more open to having that meeting? Because you and I have talked for years about how men have to be shot or bleeding before they go to the doctor, and how that whole big gap of care from a pediatrician to grown-up men. So have you noticed an increase because of the pandemic? I'm hoping to find the silver lining that
Yeah.
Just
How do I say this without making everyone laugh? I saw a tremendous increase in certain disease processes during COVID-19. One of them, which was erectile dysfunction. It was very interesting how many men, I was like, man, why am I seeing so many new patients come in with erectile dysfunction or symptoms of low testosterone? And obviously we can sit here for an hour and talk about all the different reasons. They're bored at home. I don't know what's going on, but I did find a lot more men coming in for certain disease processes that they usually drag themselves a while for. But honestly, I would say I haven't seen that uptick, and that maybe because my practice is already so busy as it is that I'm not seeing that major shift in numbers. I would say it's probably still the same. And I can say that based on the statistics on men's health. Like men, 10 years ago when I started using this quote, it's still the same quote. We still live 5 years less than our female counterpart. But I do see a shift coming thanks to technology. I was just listening to this podcast on how Apple is trying to change the dynamic of healthcare. There's so many companies, not just like Apple, but there's like 1,000 companies that are on a small scale working on improving the efficiencies of how healthcare is delivered. And I think that's going to be really exciting for men, because men like to keep things simple. And at least I do. And when it's complex, they're like, oh, I'm going to just go do something else. Now I'm generalizing. Not every guy's like that. So please be offended if you're watching this. But I think technology will definitely drive. Now, right now, that technology is telehealth and telemedicine. I think we'll have to wait and see. But I personally have not seen a major, throng of guys coming in to be seen. But it may be different for other specialties.
So I have a quick question, or maybe it's not a quick question. I don't know. I'll ask you. So I was doing a little research, and I came across a study that seemed pretty tenable by some folks called Harris and Fronzak. I don't know if that rings a bell. And I'll read you the quote, and then I'll let you respond to it. The trend for parenthood at an older age has also been seen in men. Since 1980, the fertility rate for men in their 30s has increased by 21%. And for men aged over 40, the rate has increased nearly 30%, which is, what I see with my friends too. In contrast, the fertility rate in men younger than 30 has decreased by 15%. So my question here is, as we age, how does age play into these trends that we're seeing in fertility, and specifically, relatively short term over the last couple of years with COVID?
Honestly, people are just enjoying life and waiting longer to either commit themselves to a partner, or even if they're in a committed relationship, they're just waiting longer to have kids. I know in my parents' generation, it was you're married in your early 20s,
right?
You have a kid. It's very goal driven. You have to do this to get to this, to get to this. I know that for a fact, because when I got married, my mom, even before we were done getting married, was like, hey, when are you going to have a kid? It's the same thing with school. Like, hey, you finished high school, now you got to go to college. First day of college, hey, med school. First day of med school, hey, what about residency? Are you thinking about it? Thinking about it. So, I would say I'm in kind of like that bridge generation where, I was still very influenced by my parents, and I'm very appreciative that they kind of pushed me towards this. But I think my kid's generation is going to be a little bit different. I think they're going to be more worldly, more globally thinking, and more likely to delay certain things that may inhibit their ability to see the world. And I know it's like such a global statement, but that is proven. Like if you look at millennials, and that's the population now that's, you know, reaching their 30s plus, like they have delayed, and that's because they focused on other things, but also their professions have also made it become a priority. So these individuals are really trying to get the best at their profession. And what's very interesting, this is a segue into a different conversation, but the rates of men's banking their sperm has gone up significantly. So men know, like, hey, I think a lot of guys are aware that, hey, if I wait later on, it's going to be affected. So I'm going to go bank some sperm. There's not that much marketing out there for sperm banking, but if you look at the amount of sperm being banked, it's growing significantly every single year. So it's just a very interesting trend.
Wow,
And a quick follow up to the sperm bank issue specifically. Since you brought that up, what do you we're seeing huge increases in awareness around testicular cancer. Never have I heard so many conversations among young men about grabbing your balls once a month when you're in the shower.
Yeah.
But it's now at a point where it's socially acceptable to say those sorts of things, just like it became that way 20 or 30 years ago with women and self-exams for breast cancer. And do you think there's some kind of relationship there between the fact that they're saying, well, I'm healthy now at 27 or 32, and I know I don't want kids until I'm in my late 30s, and I could have testicular cancer, and so maybe I should bank some of the sperm. Maybe that's becoming more part of the daily conversation.
I wish it was as perfect and sexy as you described it, but the reality is a lot of the awareness I feel personally came from celebrities and marketing. Celebrities, there's been quite a few celebrities and athletes that have dealt with testicular cancer over the past 10 years. So when it hits a celebrity, you're going to see a lot of stuff out in the media and the press. The second is marketing. There's been not bad marketing, good marketing. There's a lot of really cool men's health movements out there. Now, we had our drive for men's health, but a larger, grander movement that we all strive to one day get to is the Movember movement. And they just made talking about health fun. And it's like they played on people's like hesitations and anxieties and came up with this really cool, understandable campaign. But there's other nonprofits out there that are doing the same and using the same tactics in marketing. So they're kind of driving this change in messaging and using social media influencers to talk about stuff. It's just, I think it's more how we're much more glued to a screen and we're seeing this information come from people that we consider are authorities, not really authorities, but influencers. That being said, you can follow me on social media at drjaminb. So.
And I'm
by no means a social media influencer. I'm by no means a social media influencer. But if you're a professional, I do ask you to follow me on LinkedIn. I don't accept really patients or anyone else on there, but I do have a very good professional network where I do share really cool information. But there's definitely people out there much more open to talk about these sensitive topics.
Kristen, I sort of cut you off there, but I wanted to jump on that testicular cancer thing at Sperm Bank. So I'm sorry, I apologize for that. But anyway, I'm going to shut up for a couple of minutes and let you ask your questions.
I'm enjoying your conversation. I don't remember what I wanted to say. so we're all good. No worries.
All right.
I think for listening to this, within my clients with infertility, the gentlemen are usually the quiet ones in the room. And I love when we have these conversations because I'm sure when the couple comes in, it's really female focused. And I just had a new client this morning and she was telling me everything she did. And I said, to her partner, have you been seen? Are you thinking about being seen? And he's like, well, I was seen 2 years ago. And I'm like, well, you need to go, that's a good place for you to start. So And I think the social media too, there's a lot more conversation. My son's coming in my window about male infertility. So I concur with what you're saying.
And listen, guys, like I, you don't technically have to see a specialist to start finding out about your fertility potential. There's some companies out there where you can just do your thing in the comfort of your own home and pretty much send the specimen out. Like over the past 2 years, there's been some really cool. The biggest issue with home sperm banking has always been, oh, it's not as good. It has to be fresh. We have to look at it under a microscope. But there's been advancements in technologies and mediums that the sperm can, or the semen, the ejac can be put into, where it's been research proven that it's just, I don't want to say just as good, but it's pretty close to what it would be in an office.
And you have that live from Drive for Men. You did that live with.
Yeah. So yes, that was I think it was Track, which looked at sperm counts, but that looked at like general sperm counts. Then there's, oh man, I'm like forgetting all these names, but I know there's a company called Fellow, which has like a little whale. I don't. The only reason I remember their name is because they have Fellow, but they have a whale with a spout. They have a spout which looks like ejaculate. I'm like, man, this is really cool marketing. Like, this is really cool marketing. But you can order a kit from them and do it in the comfort of your own home. And I'm like, I was kind of tempted to try it on my own to see how good it is. But looking at their studies, and there's 3 other companies just like that that are really making things more accessible. But here's the thing though. When you get your report, you don't stop there. Like, you could have a normal report and still internally have things that are causing your infertility. So all because you have a normal sperm count or semen analysis. I keep saying sperm count, but that's only one of like 10 things we look at. You can have a normal semen analysis and you can do these at-home tests, or you could do, I think it's a Yo test, which you put under an iPhone and look at motility of your sperm, like how they move. It's just a start, guys. It's just a start. It's kind of like you go to the grocery store, there's a blood pressure monitor and your blood pressure is high. It's not the end of it. It's just kind of the start of what your journey.
I have 2 questions kind of related to that, actually. One, for you as a professional, when you see a sperm count, and I know that they range from, if I remember right, from like 15 to 200 million, right, is roughly speaking considered a normal range. For those of us out here in the field, so to speak, that number seems immense. The distance from 15 to 200 is gigantic. And so we think, well, I'm at 18 or I'm at 108. So how do you as the professional make that number make sense to the regular guy? And let me put part 2 out there as well, because I think they're tied into each other, and you'll say it properly, and I'm kind of stumbling here for words. Are some guys, even though they might have quote unquote low sperm counts, are their little swimmers maybe a little more efficient? They're either better swimmers or maybe. Okay, go ahead.
No, you took the words right out of my mouth. The number is just a number, and it's relative. You could get a semen analysis today, you can get one in 3 days, you can get one in 5 days, you can get it in 3 months, and there's going to be variability because we don't look at all the sperm. We look at a sample, and there's machines that kind of advance it and make it a little bit more precise. But you can have dynamic shifts in your sperm counts just based on how many times you did it the night before with your wife or your partner, or based on stress levels or how much caffeine you ate or how much sleep you got. So there's so much variability. So what we look at is trends. Now, the numbers you quoted, such a wide range. Well, there's the World Health Organization that kind of dictates some of these, what is the low cutoff where we can say that something is abnormal. So you raise that red flag. Now, we know with any lab, whether you're reading a cholesterol lab or a sperm lab or your kidney function, that red flag is just automated things. So you can't just freak out if it comes off as abnormal, or freak out if it comes off as too much. Men with very few sperm are having tons of babies without any problems. And then there's men with Superman levels of sperm that are having issues with fertility. Now, obviously, you could bang for your buck sorry for no pun intended, bang for your buck when you have more. But you're absolutely right. Your counts are not just what we look at. We look at your motility. We look at morphology. Like, what do they actually look like? They actually look like that sperm when you close your eyes that you envision it being. We look at the environment that it's in. And so there's so many different parameters that you can't just get fixated on one thing. Now, I just want to pause and go back to something Kristen was talking about, is the wife is always talking and on track and the guy is dragging his feet. You'd be surprised how many times a year I see couples with come see me for infertility and they ain't doing it. Like, they're not having sex. I'm like, are you like, this is a problem? They're like, oh, we're stressed out, but we do it when the iPhone app tells me that I'm ovulating. I do this all the time in my office. Like, oh my gosh, like, we get so fixated on this calendar, this timer, this thing that there's like all this technology that looks at like your temperature as a female, and so it's like it becomes almost robotic. And you have to, what I tell my couples is throw the app out and just have some fun and do it every other day. Don't worry about, what your temperature is, or don't worry about like, oh, my egg may have dropped now because my app is telling me that may be the case now. Like, just enjoy each other, because the number one reason you're probably having issues with fertility is because you guys are stressed out. So just chill out. Hopefully no one's mad at me for that.
Do you remember the Scrubs episodes where Turk and Carla were trying to have a baby, and they were having horrific times getting pregnant, and they were doing exactly what you were saying. Oh, it's such and such o'clock, and we better, and I got to keep my feet up in the air so that the semen pools in my cervix. And this was, you were probably, I don't know how old you are. You might have been in undergrad back then. But
no, I watched a lot of Scrubs. I feel like Scrubs, if you look at medical dramas and TV stuff, Scrubs is actually the most true to life to a real career in medicine. Like, you'd be like, really? Is it really that way? Like, you have these like really dynamic personalities, and then you just have these moments where no one understands why we're laughing or why we enjoy what we do or why we suffer through those on-calls. But there's just this camaraderie that keeps you going. So I love Scrubs. I remember that episode, but I don't remember that episode.
Right.
But you're absolutely right in using it as an example of like how stressed people can be and how they just get so focused on the science or the app or the technology and forget just to enjoy each other.
Yeah.
Right. David, I think you covered your questions, or should
Pretty
I?
much.
Okay.
Well, I did have a little bit of a follow-up to that. The last bit of that is, are we seeing some kind of regression to the mean here, maybe? That perhaps we're not really as bad off right now as we think. If we look at historical, over the last 20, 50, 100 years, don't fertility rates kind of move up and down, kind of like a sine wave anyway throughout time? We've always seen periods where populations have boomed and then bust, just like every other ecological relationship. Humans are a part of that same kind of environment.
Yeah, here's the issue with some of these numbers that you may see is like, to do population-based research, it takes years of data. So what we're hearing today about what our problems may be is essentially extrapolated information based on trends over X number of years. So yes, there may be things that come out that may freak us out, but 10 years from now, when hopefully we'll be invited back to this conversation, and I won't say how old I will be when it's 10 years from now, but you're gonna see, honestly, I feel like we're gonna be talking about the same statistics. I don't think we're gonna see a major shift, at least where we are here, just yet.
Okay, thanks, Shweta. I'm done.
All right, thank you, David. Kristen, you can go ahead with your questions. I wanted to introduce you briefly. Of course, Dr. Brahmbhatt knows you, David knows you, but for the audience, Kristen Darcy is a noted author, fertility coach, and motivational speaker, highlighted in many national publications and broadcast media. She's also a former board member and volunteer for Resolve of New England. Kristen, please go ahead with your questions.
Thank you. I think what I love about Doctor is that he's just so practical. So I think the only last question I have that we didn't really cover was, closing, maybe 3 things that you can say to the typical guy that you're talking to, what they can do for their overall health, because there is a connection between overall health, like you said, and fertility. So, what are 3 things somebody can do that, starting tomorrow, besides get off the couch and move and, do you have any pearls of wisdom?
No, it's that boring stuff, guys. You want to hear some exciting things that I can recommend to you, but it's the boring stuff that keeps your sperm floating the right way and keeps your heart pumping and keeps you living longer. Not only living longer, but having sex longer. And I used to try to think of cool things that I can mention that are new and different, but now I'm just like, listen, it's boring. I know it's boring talking about working out at least 150 minutes a week. I know it's boring talking about eating the right foods, but it's also boring to wake up in the morning and take a shower sometimes. It's also boring to have to brush your teeth. It's also boring to go and get a haircut, but we do it. If you turn on your phone right now, actually, all of us can do it. Let's go to our screen times and look at what we've been doing online. So I get so many guys in my office saying, oh, I don't got time. I'm like, hey, you want to, do you know there's something called screen time on your phone? You want to go through it? And then we go through it. And if they let me, if I don't do this on the first date in the office with them, but when they're giving me excuses, I have them pull up their phone and then we go over their screen time. So I didn't know I was going to be talking about this, but I will pull up my screen time today. It says 6 hours and 37 minutes, of which an hour and 23 was social media. Hour and 23 social media. That's all we need to work out in a week. Right. to meet our fitness goals. Yet now some people may say, oh, I go on social media when I'm working out, I'm like, right. Guys, it's the boring stuff that matters. And I realize this more and more and more as my kids are now 8 and 9. I have twins and one that's older. I'll be honest with you, I'm going to be turning 40 this September. What? And I realize more and more and more that the boring stuff is very, very important. I'll be very honest with you. All this advice I gave you, I ain't perfect at it. I'm not. I try to be a role model. I lost a whole bunch of weight. I exercise. And then in the past 6 months with COVID, work, stress, I've gained 15 pounds. I wasn't sleeping as much as I should. I was down to maybe 4 hours of sleep because I was so stressed out. I was losing hair. So I'm not here trying to be your perfect role model. I'm just trying to tell you that as a dude myself, these struggles are real. I've dealt with my own anxieties, my own mental health issues, my own physical issues. So we just have to stop acting like we're perfect and talk to not just ourselves, but our doctors, with our friends, our brothers, our whoever it is. Just talk to them honestly, be real with them, and just be honest about what you're feeling. I knew I was going to be on this today, so I actually started going back to the gym and did my 1 hour workout and posted about it. And it was so cool because I haven't posted a workout thing in such a long time. I posted even on LinkedIn, which I rarely talk, do Instagram kind of stuff on LinkedIn. So many guys mentioned me yo, I went to the gym today. Because what you posted, I went on a 10-minute run. I'm like, really? Because of I posted that I'm doing it. So it's pretty amazing how just one person can inspire you. And just like I got inspired because I was going to be talking about this stuff today. But we all struggle, and it's okay. That's what makes us human. That's what makes life so exciting. And we shouldn't let our struggles get us down. Like, if anything, our struggles make tomorrow that much sweeter, because tomorrow we won't be making those same mistakes.
So thank you. Kristen, you have other questions for Doctor?
I think we covered them within the conversation.
Okay, cool. Yes, absolutely.
I think we're all good.
Right. So Dr. Brahmbhatt, it was a great conversation, and thank you for your time. But, before I wind up, I just wanted to ask you, with the kind of decline that we are seeing in male fertility and that we are noticing right now, you're 10 years down the line, and I know you have partly kind of answered this, but 10 years down the line, how do you anticipate the future of men's healthcare would change because of these findings? And would that mean like more emphasis on early testing of sperm health specifically, so that corrective measures can be taken well before? And my other part of the question is that what are your recommendations for teenage boys and men who are waiting to start their family?
Yeah. So your first question, if I forget your second question, please remind me. So
okay, sure.
My answer to your first question would be and we kind of talked about some of this stuff when you were locked out, but I will frame it a little bit differently. In 10 years from now, I think we are going to see men live healthier, more active lives. I think so. But are men going to live longer? Not just yet, because I think it's going to take a couple of generations to start shifting those dynamics. And I think the best thing that's happening today in the world is that we're openly talking about controversial issues, and things that were controversial back in the day are no longer controversial today. So we're getting there. Right. And so I do think men will likely be more engaged. As we talked about earlier, there's going to be technologies that are going to help that, and access points are opening up. So not only telemedicine, but you see pharmacies getting into like the primary care business. You see the Amazons of the world engaging in primary care business. Apple, if you start a satellite a urology office, then I would love to come work for you. No, I'm just kidding, Orlando. I love Orlando. But no, all jokes aside, I think they're going to make health a lot sexier, and I think there is going to be a shift. But the problem is there's going to be more people born then, and there's going to be more people out there, and the problems we have here in America are not as bad as the problems that other countries have. Like, you just take, for example, what's happened in India with COVID vaccinations. My wife is from Kenya, Nairobi. These people are struggling just to put food on the table in certain parts of the world. And we have so much food on our table that we don't know what to do with it sometimes. So to get that big shift in numbers, it's going to have to be a global change, not just a local change here, and that's going to take some time. And you mentioned what can teenage boys do?
Absolutely.
Man, teenage boys. I think there's 3 things you can do as a teenage boy. Number 1 is stop watching porn. I think the porn industry sets a lot of men up for a false perception on what intimacy is and what relationships should be. I actually during COVID, I saw a lot of young guys come in, and some of them were like, "Oh, I have a too small penis," or "I'm not lasting long enough in bed," or I don't like my girlfriend. Or I'm like, wow, I'm like, is this age correct that you're seeing me for these issues? And the common thread in most of these conversations, after I kind of can get out of them, is they're basing their intimacy and relationships on a website where they go on at night and watch porn. So that's what I would say, guys. The reality is not what you see in the adult film industry. So don't make that your reality. The second thing young guys can do is, especially for sexually active, you should go and see a doctor and get tested for STDs at least once a year. And that's actually a very common screening guideline now, that you should get tested for some of these things, because the rates are high, and if some things are found, then you can be cured earlier. But also, that STD testing once a year gets you engaged with a medical professional. And I think that's the real tactic there is let's use this as a way to get guys in, because men just don't engage with healthcare professionals like a female may have opportunities to, because let's just be honest, like birth control, mostly female driven. If it's at a younger age, they're going to see a medical professional. Fertility days, they're going to see a medical professional. Whereas dudes like just wait till, something is wrong or red light goes off. But be your own advocate. Go ahead, just like you're stressed out about getting into med school or business school, or stressed out about that person on Tinder that you've swiped right, whether they'll swipe right on you. Go and get yourself checked out. And especially if you're in college or medical school or elsewhere, from professional school, you have these healthcare clinics that are there just for you as students. So go and get yourself checked out. And the third thing is, do not believe social media. I think the biggest pandemic we're about to see in our youths is a mental health pandemic, not even a physical pandemic. When it comes to anxiety, depression, dependence on alcohol and other drugs, we're seeing more and more of that in the younger generation. And a lot of it, I feel, is driven by how much we're consuming social media. And it can be very dangerous. So if there's something I can recommend is cut off that screen time. It's fine. There has to be a balance. Cut it off, but don't be overly invested in it. Take time in the day to appreciate the trees and take in the fresh air and talk to someone, engage with your family. I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned since COVID. And if you guys follow me on social media, like my social media posting has gone down so much.
That's right.
And that's because my time with my family has gone up this much. Like I love just talking to people, and I love it. And I'm just so much happier because of that. So as a young kid, like those are the three things I would recommend. I know they seem kind of crazy, but that's the reality.
No, absolutely.
I want to ask you a question. I'm so grateful you brought up the porn, because this whole, you and I have had a whole talk about this for an hour. So it's an addiction. Their brains are at that very delicate time, and they have this addiction. So what do you advise, or when a young guy shows up in your office, what do you tell them when they say,
absolutely, good question. Mm-hmm.
I have this problem?
Oh man, that's a very tough one. And that's where I kind of recruit a team. I start off and do as much as I can, but I do try to get them engaged with some kind of therapist or therapy, because I can't do it alone. It's at the end of the day, I'm a surgeon and I'm a healthcare professional, and it's really hard. So that's when I know my limits, and I try to get a whole team involved in the whole process. So I always tell them, hey man, you're having issues with your girlfriend? Like, why don't you bring her in next time? So, hey, then we can get their communication better on their needs. Because I remember this one patient a couple months ago, all he wanted was to try a different position in the bedroom. But then he went on this whole thing about it that he saw on porn. And then it was crazy. So I got him in a room, and she's like, sure. Like dude, you could have saved a lot of time and money if you just voiced your concerns to them. But it's hard. But you have to start off by explaining the reasons, the causes, and you have to slowly start telling them to wean off. But it is extremely difficult, to be 100% honest with you.
That's why they need a healthcare provider. That's your first stop. You gotta take that step and make the call and make the appointment and go in and talk to someone.
But it's not just but that is not just something that, I think, you, Kristen, do a lot of therapy in your office, right? Like if you're afraid to come see, someone that has an MD or a DO or ARNP or PA after their name, you're probably not even seeing the people that are best at getting you off some of these things or helping you. That's when you gotta see someone like you. And that's why I mentioned, like, I take a team approach. So we have a couple, individuals in town that I recommend these people to. But there's also online portals where they can kind of talk some of these things out. So there's lots of things that can be done. But it's just,
I have people live chat me, and I think that's part of the social media component that we're talking about. I can live chat you and help you, and you end up getting some of the referrals because that's not my wheelhouse for the physical part about it. But it's just what you said, just be open with your heart and have that conversation.
and if it's not going to see a mental health professional, or there's things like David's doing, which is groups on channels that we're browsing anyway. And it's interesting, like I would say I'm more active on Facebook on groups that I'm a part of than I am actually on my feed. And I learned so many things from certain physician groups and other groups. So, you can, if you're not willing to talk in there, then go ahead and go into a forum and just take it in like a sponge. And I bet you eventually you will kind of contribute and speak up. So I think
stock to go in and read and get all the information that you need. Just stock it. Just, you don't have to talk. Just,
Right.
Stock the information, and that's so beneficial too. So.
Yeah.
You mentioned really early about celebrity, and we were talking about, I think, testicular cancer, but to the bigger point, do you think folks like Michael Phelps talking about, whether it's telephone therapy or text therapy, I mean, that's like the gateway drug, I think, for a whole lot of people in a younger generation. Do you agree or disagree that using the social media, meeting them where they are, can really be an important component to getting them to where they need to be? Because, let's face it, teenage boys with porn problems are probably not going to talk to their family practice doc about it, but they might talk to somebody via text who is relatively anonymous that they don't have to look in the eye.
Yeah, but there's only one company doing that, and there's 9 other companies doing same amount of ad dollars trying to get dudes distracted and engage in other things. So it's great, and I think celebrity status is great. It definitely raises influence, but it doesn't get us exactly where we need to go. But if it reaches an audience, I think it's still great.
It has been a wonderful discussion today, and it was so nice, listening to you, Dr. Brahmbhatt, and David and Kristen. Thank you so much for your questions. It was an awesome discussion, and this will be posted on curetalks.com page, and this is also available on YouTube. Thank you for your time, everybody, and until next time, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you.